Hi everyone, and welcome to my video where we're going to be going over some HTML input types along with some input attributes that you could put into your inputs. So let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see here, I've already kind of set this up. So I'm just going to be going over each one of these things with the visualization over here. So let's start with an email. So you have the email type, and with the email type, so let's say, and all of these, by the way, are in the form element. So let's say I put an email right here, and I go here and I click my submit button. So if you watch my previous video, when you hit submit, it sends that data over to the server. You can see that it's yelling at me to please include an @ in the email. So that is because the input type is email, so it does some validation by itself when it's set to that. And let's just refresh the page again real quick. You can see that the placeholder attribute, and the placeholder attribute can be put like for most of these elements, but the placeholder attribute, you can see that here it says the email address, and it says it right here. And then when I type, it goes away. And when I delete everything, if nothing is in there, it automatically just puts that back in. So now let's put something in here. Valid email, and you'll see that when I hit the submit button, there's no more validation issue there. And just real quick, so it's yelling at me to fill out this field because with the attribute of required, so this is the type text for text box, I'm telling it that it can't be blank. If the user's trying to submit it, it's required, so it can't be blank. So when the user enters something in there, they click submit, they're able to successfully submit their form. So let's continue. So now the next input type is URL. So here, let's say that you type anything. Again, you hit submit. It yells at you saying that you need to enter a correct URL. And I believe that the URL validation is this. You just need to put HTTP in front of it. There we go. So now it's no longer yelling at me about that. Number, so right now I'm typing in letters, but that won't work. So it allows me to type in numbers and the period, and then it allows me to click the up and down arrows to go up and down by 1. And then here you can see that I have another number element, and you can see that I can't go below 4 and I can't go above 10. And again, the reason is because of the attributes. I've set the minimum attribute here to equal 4 and the max to equal 10, so it doesn't allow me to enter more. So let's say I hit submit, and it says value must be less than or equal to 10. So let's just fix this up. All right, here's another number text box element. And this time, if we click the up arrow, so here you saw that it's incrementing and decreasing by 1. This is incrementing and decreasing by 2. And I did that by using the step attribute here. Range. So with the range, it's just a slider like this. And this is how the range input element works. And if you set the minimum and maximum range attributes, then the minimum right now is 4, and you can see kind of how it's jumping. So right now it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it jumps like this. And I think the default for this is probably 0 through 100. So now let's go over to our date attribute. So here you can see that I have a date attribute that I can put in numbers, or you can select from this date picker right here. And right now I'm in a crazy year, so because that's what I typed over here. So this is the date picker. Now let's say that you wanted to have a minimum date that they can select and a maximum date that they can select. Again, you would use the min and max attributes in the input element. And you can see that I can't change the year here. And let's try to change the year. It doesn't allow me. I can only select anything from 2021. And here's this element. It's a search element. This is just like any regular text box, but it just has an X right here so you can clear it. But it behaves the same. Our next element is the color picker. So here we have the color picker, so I'll click that, and then you can see that I can select any color that I want here. I can even use this and pick, let's say I wanted this color. There we go. And I can switch between HSL, hex, and RGB values. Our next element is the checkbox. So here you can see that I have some checkboxes. And I can select multiple, I can select none, or I can select one. And what's going to happen when you hit submit, the submit button, what's going to be submitted is this value right here. So the value that you put in here is going to be submitted to the server side. And if you want to be able to click on the text right here, you have to make sure that you create a label and that you do for, and then you give the ID of the checkbox in the for. So right now, because I'm saying that this label of cake that says cake is for this checkbox, is for this checkbox element, right? So the ID here is check cake. So whenever I click it, it's gonna check and uncheck that checkbox. Now let's say I didn't have that in there. Let's save, refresh. You can see that I'm clicking here, but it's not doing anything. But I can still click the checkbox. So let's just undo that, save, refresh, and now it's checking it. Same thing with the radio button. The radio button is kind of similar to the checkbox, except for that you can only click on one radio button in the group, in the radio group at once. So here you can see I have a group of foods, cake and apples, and I have another group here of cars and motorcycles. You can see that I can select one from each. And the way that that's accomplished is through the name. So you group it by the name. So you can see here that the cake radio button and the apples radio button both have the same name. So it's grouping them together. That's why I can only select one out of that group. And the cars and motorcycles radio buttons have the same name of vehicles. So that's why I can only select one. But I can select one radio button from both the foods and the motorcycles. Our next element is the file upload element. So here, if we click on that, you can see that I can select from only one file. So if I click on one and then I hold my control key or shift key and I click on another, it only lets me select one. So let's cancel out of this. Now, let's say that I wanted to select multiple. The way you would accomplish that is, again, through the file input type. But you would just give it the multiple attribute here. So, and that makes the difference of whether you can select one or many. And here you can see that it selected 4 files, whereas here it only selected 1. Our next element is the input type of text, and this is standard. You guys have seen this. It's the same thing as a search, just doesn't have that X. This is probably one of the most common elements. The other one is text. So all of these are going to be text, just with different attributes for me to show you. For this one I specified the size of 100 characters. So here you can see that it's like pretty long. And that the max length is 10. So that means by me specifying the max length attribute of 10, I can only type 10 characters in here, and that's it. The next text box is one that has a value already inserted in it. And the value here is equal to text box with the value. So I didn't have to put anything in here, and it already has this value in it, right? And I can delete it and whatever. The next element is again a text element, text type, and this one is read-only. So what a read-only element is that it makes the element not be able to be changed. So right now I'm typing, but I can't change it. And I can highlight it, I can copy it, and I can do whatever I want with it, but I can't change this text. And it's important to note that when you hit the submit button on a read-only element, it will still submit that element over to the back end. And let's look at the next element, which is a disabled element. So here you can see that this text box right here is disabled. It's grayed out. And the difference between read-only and disabled, besides the visuals right here, is that when I hit the submit button, a disabled element does not get submitted to the server side. That's very important to know. Now, the next element I showed you guys, the required element. So if I hit submit, it forces me to fill something in here. And I don't know why I have this email element in here, so let's just delete it. So the next element is this telephone. And you can see that when I refresh the page, the telephone is autofocused and I can immediately start typing into it. So let me refresh the page and you can see that I can immediately start typing into it. Now let's say that we wanted to autofocus, I don't know, another element. Let's say the text box with value, right? We would set this to autofocus, save, then refresh. You can see that right now text box with value is highlighted, and if I type here, it's automatically, inserting the text in there because it's focused on there. Again, we have the submit button and the button type button. And the difference between these, as I mentioned in my previous video, is that the submit will actually submit the form over to the server-sided part of your application, whereas the button will not. So if I click a button, nothing happens, and the button's mostly just used for JavaScript. And here you have the image input type. And the image input type is the same thing as an image tag. You have to specify the source and stuff, but the input element of it allows for some extra customization of the attributes and stuff. But other than that, they're practically the same thing. And last but not least, we have the input type of password. So I've gone over this in my previous video, but again, just as a refresher, if you type anything inside of the password element, you can't really see what's inside of it, and it just does bullet points. So that is it for my video. I hope that you guys learned something new about inputs. And if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe. All right, everyone, have a good rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.